The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
Our website this morning, 710knus.com, has a lot of the work of this man. Please say good morning. In Colorado, Don Frederick is our guest. Don, good morning. And
good morning, Peter.
Hey, man,
how are you today?
You know what? I tell you, my hat is so off to you for the work that you've done. I always say this to people, and maybe it's a great way to begin. For me to sign up for Obamacare, I have to provide the federal government with more personal information than Barack Obama has ever provided to become the President of the United States. Is that a fair place to begin?
Oh, it certainly is. In fact, for the listeners who might be thinking, well, wasn't Obama vetted? No, there is no federal vetting process for a presidential candidate. They leave it up to the parties.
Individuals.
If the party nominates John Doe is the candidate.
And of course,
there's no process.
That happened here in Denver, Colorado. And,
oh, yes.
And he was given, there's a notary public here that did the paperwork and notarized it, and she still lives here. I'm going to come back. Maybe we should begin at the beginning, as they said in Alice in Wonderland. A little bit about yourself and why this topic triggers you, and how long you've been working on this story. So let's begin. Don, if you would do a quick bio for the audience.
Sure. I was born and raised in Chicago in 1950. Grew up in Chicago. Had some neighbors who were somewhat involved in politics, delivering polling cards, polling stations, and doing some volunteer work like that. But I wasn't overly involved. I was a kid. By 1960, when I was 10, obviously I can't say I was involved in politics, but I paid attention, and I remember watching the Nixon-Kennedy debates on television. I remember that the election was close. I remember hearing from my parents talk about how Illinois made the difference in the election.
Absolutely.
and how Illinois was stolen for
Absolutely,
Kennedy.
Absolutely.
Anyway,
all of that is provable today, by the way.
Sure. And so time goes by, and I grew up and did what normal people do. You go to school. I served in the Army. I got a job. I got married, had kids, et cetera, et cetera. Moved to the Chicago suburbs. But I'd read the newspaper, pay attention to politics, voted in presidential elections, and usually in the congressional elections, and usually skipped the judicial elections, as most people do. Anyway, by the time Obama came on the national scene in 2004, at the convention that nominated John Kerry, and Obama gave the keynote address.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, after the address, you listen to the talking heads on television say how wonderful he was, blah, blah, blah. And personally, I wasn't that impressed with the speech. I thought, okay, he said the right words, and he didn't mispronounce anything, but I wasn't overly impressed. It doesn't read that well. It sounded okay, but none of his speeches read well. They just sound good. Anyway, but I wasn't overly impressed, and I knew something about his past from his history as a state senator in Springfield, Illinois. When he did decide to run for president, I thought, now this is odd. He's been in the Senate for, 2 years, hasn't done anything,
Was it 100, and I've heard different numbers when he enters the Iowa caucuses.
Yeah, I mean, considering all the vacation days
Indeed.
that the senators have, it was something in the low hundreds, like 110.
I thought. Don't hold me to this. I thought I read 136 days.
Yeah, that could be. It was in the low hundreds, and he didn't do much. He was he was the chair of a subcommittee of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. I think for the Middle East. I don't remember. But anyway, a Senate subcommittee. And he rarely held meetings. And when there were meetings, he often didn't show up. He didn't do anything, put it that way. He did nothing in the Senate, somewhat like Hillary Clinton didn't do anything in the Senate. So I was stunned when he decided he'd run for president, as were probably a lot of people. But I thought, well, big deal. He'll just try to push Hillary a little to the left during the primaries, but she'll have it sewn up because, well, the media probably was going to push her like the media was going to push John McCain.
Sure.
It was a done deal. So I didn't pay much attention to it. And then by mid-2007, or late 2007 rather, that's when I decided to get involved. I took an early retirement from my job, started my website, the ObamaTimeline.com, where I started chronicling the past of Obama, trying to persuade people that, hey, this is not the guy you want to vote for. I'm not a fan of Hillary, but I was less of a fan of Barack Obama. And at one point I had 80, 90,000 people a day reading the website, and I thought, well, I'm making some progress. Maybe we have a chance of defeating him. So I kept adding to the website. Every day I'd find out a little more. And as time went by, of course, I had people who would send me things, say, hey, I'll bet you didn't know this about Obama, and they'd send me links to websites, or they'd send me newspaper articles, they'd quit, things like that.
And that's the beginning of this.
Right, and that was the beginning. So it kept developing, and I kept writing more and more, and I thought, I'm going to keep doing this. Yes, he won the primary through some shenanigans, as the Clintons know, but I'm going to keep doing it. I'm going to do my best to keep promoting the information I know about him so that he can lose in November. Well, that, of course, didn't happen. And at that point, I could have just given up. It would have been easy to just say, all right, I had my fill. I tried my best. It didn't work. But I couldn't. And by that point, I had learned so much more about him, in addition to what I already knew just from living in the area and reading the Chicago newspapers, that I said, I have to keep going. And that's what happened. I kept writing more and more, and I spent more and more time on it, and I'd be at the computer 10 hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking to people on the phone. I was interviewing people who went to school with Obama's so-called father at the University of Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
I spoke to some elected officials. I spoke to some law enforcement officials, some private detectives, and slowly I just started gathering more and more information. Anyway, by mid-2009, I took what I had assembled at that point, basically his life from 1961 through his first 100 days in office, had it published as the Obama Timeline. That was part one. That's in paperback. Part two, I started where I left off, and that's all on my website, the ObamaTimeline.com. And every month is out there. Some months exceed 200 pages. Parts 1 and 2 combined, they run from 1961 to last night. It's about 50 pages short of 10,000 pages now.
I have the pleasure and the honor and distinction to work with this incredible man by the name of Mark Crowley, and this show has had tremendous success. And it really, the young man who contacted you, Casey, and of course Mr. C, they really, I'm just the pneumatic tube system, the talking head. Mark Crowley has put as much of your work up on our website, and like I said, you ain't an easy read, but
no.
I'll tell you what, you have. I have been jacketed a birther and a racist and all those ad hominem attacks that and maybe I don't know if you go through this or not. Everybody who writes, if they have the intestinal fortitude, the testicular strength to sign it, or they politically cartoon me in one of the local papers or write a column, I will pick up the phone and invite them on the radio show in a very kind manner.
Okay.
They do one of two things. The one response is, I will not appear on your racist show, and the other one is no response at all.
Yes.
But interestingly enough, seemingly in the last, I'm going to say year, Don, it's all gone away. The columnists, the cartoonists, and others have vanished. Now, I still get the unsigned emails, and I read them on the air. It doesn't trouble me. But let me ask you this question, even before we begin with your hard work and the hard work of others to sort of dovetail it all together. You and I are both old guys. Will we see the truth break surface before we're gone?
Well, I certainly hope so. I spoke with one of my brothers yesterday, and he wondered, why am I even doing this?
Yeah, sure.
He's more cynical than many people, and and I see his point, because as we mentioned a few minutes ago, honesty didn't help in 1960.
No.
Thuggery was used to win the election. LBJ won the Senate elections in Texas.
Oh.
There's thuggery on both sides, Republicans and Democrats. So vote fraud, yes, they both do it. Yes, there's corruption on both sides. So you can easily withdraw into your shell, say, I don't care, I'm going to watch Dancing with the Stars and go play golf.
Yeah.
And that's fine, but some part of some people, including me, says, no, I'm going to do
Thank
something.
you. Yeah.
And if it works, fine. My only hope is, I have your concerns too, will something happen in my lifetime?
Mm-hmm.
My only hope is that somewhere along the line there will be a little crack and somebody will come forward and start to talk.
Mm-hmm.
And once one person does, there will be an avalanche, and people will be saying, I'll talk, but I want immunity.
Yeah.
Please give me immunity.
Yeah.
Now, it may not happen for a while, and it may not happen until after he's out of office.
Mm-hmm.
But at some point, I think the truth will come out, and I think it will happen in my lifetime, and he will be totally humiliated and disgraced.
But
yes, there still will be 30 million people who worship him, but
the greatest disgrace will be the mainstream press. The Brian Williamses, the Denver Post, that's really where the disgrace will fall. We share a friend in Joel Gilbert. Joel Gilbert, Joel Gilbert thinks the world of you. Joel Gilbert was one of the ways I found out about you, but Gilbert has said to the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., there's a Pulitzer out there. Who wants it? I mean, Gilbert's tried. I've tried. You obviously have done more than try. You have been light years.
Gilbert has been sending out free DVDs.
Oh, absolutely. Well, there's no question. I avoid the conversation in my private time away from the radio show, but on the radio show, I try and drive this story, and I know that there are more and more people that we either convert or convince or at least walk away from us with questions. But I get to ask this question all the time. Do you think anybody really knows the straight story, Don? You've come as close as anyone, and like I said, I've been reading you now every night. And for me, late nights, 9:30, quarter to 10, because I get up at 3. But I'm telling you, you come as close as anyone. I have Jerry Corsi, you, Joel, Jack Cashel. I mean,
yes,
I get on
Corsi, Cashel, yeah.
I get on a list of these people that are and every one of them has been attacked as a racist. Every one of them has been attacked as a bigot, a Klansman, a neo-Nazi,
and that's just, you just mentioned the writers. You also have the attorneys, like Mario Apuzzo,
another one,
Leo D'Onofrio,
another one. I mean,
Colonel,
and there is this handful of, and it gets it gets bigger all the time. But, I just had this conversation, I think, with Joel Gilbert because his new film is out, and I asked him, I said, Joel, will this, as I say, break surface? Will, much like, I mean, so many other issues in our past that, whether it was the Gulf of Tonkin resolution or what happened when George Bush, puts the con job in Iraq, or, get on a list of things, who killed John Kennedy. Will this break surface? And somebody say, and there's a great line from Benjamin Franklin, and Dr. Franklin said, 3 can keep a secret if 2 of them are dead. And somebody, I mean, and I don't, the question is, how many people do you think really know the true, straight story of Barack Obama's life, Don? And our guest is Don Fredrick, and he's going to be with us until before 8 o'clock. And all of his work, again, Mark Crowley has outdone himself, 710knus.com, and I'll talk to you in about 4 or 5 days when you start to read. Who knows the truth?
Frankly, I'm not even sure he knows the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Because, of course, you're present at the moment of your birth, but you obviously wouldn't remember it.
Agreed.
So he may not even know. I have a suspicion that he didn't find out the truth until perhaps his grandfather died, Stanley Armour Dunham. His mother, of course, knew who the father was. His mother knew the secrets. I suspect her mother, the grandmother, Madeline Dunham, knew. But I think they kept it a secret from the grandfather. I may be totally off base on that, but that's what I think. And then when the grandfather died, somewhere along the line, Stanley Ann Dunham, between the time he died and her own death, she told Sonny what the truth was. Because I think for a long time he really did believe he was the son of the drunken Kenyan socialist.
Or that he was a Kenyan prince or whatever the hell else he told people.
Yeah. It's all kind of fascinating. You know, I'm amazed. Like you, I get the death threats. I get the prank calls. I get the this and that and blah blah blah.
Hey.
And I'm always amazed by the number of people who cannot believe that somebody would lie about his past, but they can believe that Ronan Farrow is the son of Woody Allen.
Or better yet, that one of my friends who said the mainstream press wants Roger Goodell to resign because, quote, he lied. But we got Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton.
Right.
We got and this is thank you, Chris. I mean, isn't that a great line where Goodell has to go as a liar, but the rest of these people can obviously be lionized.
It's stunning. But we all have our own filters, and I'm sure I have mine too.
Of course.
And so be it. But well, you try to do your best. Like you, I'm essentially a conduit. Yes, I've written 10,000 pages, but a lot of it is quotes. A lot of it is extracts from articles.
Sure.
This is what I found, and so be it. And I did my best to put different sides of the story in the timeline. I did, of course, omit things like, Obama's the child of an alien. He's from Mars.
Of course.
Of that, obviously, those things are not in there. But if there's a rumor with any sense of possibility, it's in the timeline. I'll say it's a rumor. I'll say I can't verify it, but it's in there. Let the reader decide.
One of the things that I said in learning to read history, and my mentor Brooks Van Erben just passed away, but like I use this as an example. When I was a little kid, the Custer's Last Stand, and I used to go to a bar with my dad every once in a while. It had that Budweiser thing with George Custer, the last guy, and he's wearing all the buckskin and long blonde hair, and he's got those Colt pistols, and he's the last guy on the hill, and all these dead people, and I thought that was the truth. And I saw Errol Flynn, they died with their boots on. I thought that was the truth. Yeah. Then you start to read, and then you start to read the Native American side of this, and then you start to read the military, you start to read the politics, and then you start to read this guy and that guy. And pretty soon you come to some pretty interesting conclusions that who George Custer was, how arrogant he was, he was absolutely borderline, almost, sociopathic, his wife, what they did, how they died, how quickly he died, all those things. And you walk away and you go, okay, now maybe I got an understanding of what that was about. But had I stopped at Errol Flynn and the Budweiser, diorama in the bar that my old man drank in, that's all I'd know.
Right.
And so when people, I think, willingly, the Denver Post, the local media outlets, and others suppress it. And maybe because they bought in.
Well, and others, I think many Americans stopped thinking after his 2004 keynote address.
Maybe.
They heard him say there are no red states, there are no blue states,
there's just
white America, black America, there's just the United States of America. Okay, that's fine, and arguably that's true or should be true, but they stopped the thought process.
I don't know why. No, I think I disagree. I mean, there's such, Obama right now is almost a Nixonville in his ratings. There's, his approval ratings. And one of the conversations I've had with Corsi and others is that, well, maybe when he drops down into Nixon land, maybe somebody will step up and throw the punch. And I want to come to this because one of the things that you did, there's a guy that I named Jimmy Down the Hall. And Jimmy Down the Hall is the guy who invented the birth certificate. He's the guy that made a politically correct birth certificate that is so fraught with problems. I mean, it's clearly a forgery. And how that arrived and how they suddenly pulled that rabbit out of the hat when Corsi's book was dropping. And people were really beginning to question. And what you do is you name the guy that I call Jimmy Down the Hall. I need to take our first break. And let's go to that birth certificate because you believe you know who manufactured the birth certificate. And I mean, that's big time for a guy like me who geeked around this thing for so many years, that you think you know who Jimmy Down the Hall is.
It's probably Janie.
Hang on a second. Or Janie. Oh, very good. Yeah, you'll change that. You change my approach, but you're right. But I always called that guy. I called that guy Jimmy Down the Hall, and because of father's race, African. There's no such thing as African as a race.
Right.
All right, hang on a second. This guy is a special guy, Don Fredrick. This man is just as good as it gets. He is a researcher into the life of Barack Obama. We are called birthers, and I decided to wear that jacket proudly when people start calling us birthers. And I said, okay, I'll be a birther if that's what you want. Other guys have called themselves truthers, which is okay too, but we don't know. And the people who call us that, when we email them or phone call them and say, okay, well, let's come in and talk about his life, want nothing to do with us, and I certainly believe that they want nothing to do with you. But when we broke away, one of the things that happened in the search for who is Barack Obama was the arrival of a birth certificate. Who do you believe did it?
Well, let me preface this by saying I've had three names running through my head over the last couple of years. All are women. The first, who I've now pretty much excluded, is Bernardine Dorn, the wife of Bill Ayers, the terrorist. Dorn, when she was with the Students for Democratic Society and the Weathermen, she was the forger and identity theft expert for the Weathermen. So when people need to flee from the police, hide from the FBI, one of her jobs was to help them create their false identities. So that crossed my mind. And there's some suggestion that the forger was a woman from some of the investigations going on. So she had crossed my mind, but I ruled her out partly because by 2011, when Trump started making a fuss about it and the so-called document was released, I think the Obamas and the Ayers had already had a falling out for a variety of reasons. So that was one. The other thought was Valerie Jarrett. Now, Valerie Jarrett, who I call Val Sputin, is Obama's closest aide.
Remember what they call Hillary. They call her the Hilda Beast. Did you read that? They call her the Hilda Beast.
Hilda Beast. And but Val Sputin, Valerie Jarrett, was a slumlord in Chicago. In fact, her grandfather was Robert Taylor, after whom the infamous Robert Taylor ghetto public housing homes were named in Chicago. She herself was a slumlord running private company that got city money to manage public housing, and they fell into disrepair and ended up getting torn down. One was called Grove Park Plaza. Anyway, she's now in the White House. By the way, she gets 24-hour Secret Service protection. Yeah. Why? Nobody knows. She's not Obama, she's not Biden, but she gets 24/7. Anyway, it's crossed my mind that she could have done the birth certificate forgery, because I think she's one of those people who's not as smart as she thinks she is.
The certificate, when the heat is building and Trump is offering money and Corsi's book is coming, and this short form PDF file, which could have been sent really by a computer, they could have emailed it, but they sent his private sector attorney and a night flight from Hawaii. I know more. I mean, I believe she made the flight. I don't believe she brought back a PDF file that was his birth certificate to you.
No, it was all just a show. So she flew to Hawaii. Jarrett, I think, could have been the forger, because, again, she's one of those people who's not as smart as she thinks she is, and she's precisely the kind of person who could create a document and say, oh, this is perfect, without realizing that it wasn't perfect at all. That
somebody could come along and, as many people have, and just take it apart.
Yeah, sure. And another option would be Loretta Fuddy, who most people have never heard of, till December
until she died.
Was it 2012, when she died in a mysterious plane crash off the coast of Hawaii, in which she was the only victim.
Only one
to die. The plane landed pretty much smoothly in the ocean. Everybody escaped with their life jackets, and we're all floating alive in the water. And then supposedly she had a heart attack.
And then she had this weird connection into this cult that came out of Indonesia, right?
Right. So there's the theory that she possibly is the forger. And because the heat was building up, she had to go. Now, whether that's true or not, who knows? You can only speculate. I wasn't there. She was a member of a cult called the Subud, S-U-B-U-D cult. I don't know how it's pronounced. It's from Indonesia. But it also has offices, or
in
whatever
Washington,
you call them, around in the United States, in Seattle, where Stanley and Dunham lived for a while, and in Hawaii. And Loretta Fuddy, She was a high-ranking Hawaiian official in this cult. Stanley Ann Dunham also had connections. Obama's mother had connections with the cult.
When she was in Indonesia, right? When she was in Indonesia.
She lived in Indonesia, where Obama lived from maybe around his fourth or fifth birthday till he returned to Hawaii in about, maybe at his 10th or 11th birthday, somewhere around that. So he spent roughly 5 years in Indonesia, during which he went to a Muslim school, and learned about the Quran. So if Stanley Ann Dunham was involved with this cult, and Loretta Fuddy was involved with this cult, and they needed to produce a birth certificate, and Loretta Fuddy knew Stanley Ann Dunham in Hawaii. I don't know that that's true, but if she did, which is a possibility, there's a strong suspicion that she might have been involved in the forgery, especially since she's no longer with us. Now, when you throw all these things together, now remember, Obama's alleged father, Obama Sr. from Kenya, his family is Sunni Muslim. Indonesia is Muslim. Now, what is it, Sunni or is it Shia? It's 90+% Sunni. Now, why does that mean anything? It's interesting because when you see any conflict around the world, if there's a conflict between Sunnis and Shiite Muslims, or between Sunnis and seculars, Obama sides with the Sunnis.
He does. That's right.
Now, why does he do that? The suspicion is, at least my suspicion is, that that's how he was raised. He's raised with allegiances to Sunni Muslim religion. Now, whether he is a practicing Muslim or an atheist, I don't know.
No, but you come back. If you go
he
back,
doesn't have sympathies.
If you go back in time, Jack Kennedy's an Irish Catholic. Who is he going to side with?
Right. And that's the whole point of the natural-born citizenship clause in the Constitution, which Americans erringly believe means nothing more than born on U.S. soil.
No.
It doesn't mean that.
No.
Historically, it has meant born on the United States soil to citizen parents. That's how it would. That's what it meant. You can find history books, court documents, congressional statements. You can find documents from that time period that define it that way.
Help me come back to, because this is probably my fault. Coming back, who do you think forged the birth certificate? And I mean, we've been over this so many times. The most glaring examples of why that's a forgery.
Yeah, well, personally, I think it was Valerie Jarrett. Now, I know other quote birthers will probably think it's Loretta Fuddy. The suspicion is it's a woman in Hawaii.
And there's also some belief that there's a guy in Homeland Security that may also be the forger.
Yeah, but I'll tend to go with the Fuddy or Jarrett theories. And I may be wrong.
No, of course.
I may be wrong about a lot of things
until
somebody admits it. But that's
But you can
now remember, because Obama can't hire a forger.
No.
He has to entrust that task with someone he knows will keep it quiet. So you can't just call anybody. Would he trust Bernardine Dorn? Dorn and Ayers had been babysitters for Obama's kids, even though he says he hardly knew them.
Or he said that their kids knew each other, and their kids are adults.
Right. So Dorn was a possibility, and that's also her history. She could have been trusted. Of course she could have been trusted. Bill Ayers wrote Dreams from My Father.
No question. No question he wrote it.
And anybody who doubts that, read Jack Cashow's book.
I agree.
Deconstructing Obama. It will persuade anybody.
But either way you approach it, the short form certificate is a layered forgery.
Yeah, and when you look at the long form certificate, same way. You cannot take a document, a birth certificate, a letter from your grandmother, anything. You cannot take a document, place it on a scanner, scan the document, and then manipulate things within that image. You can't. With the Obama document, you can open up the file. You can click on the registrar's signature stamp, rotate it, and move it around.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's impossible. You can't do that with an ordinarily scanned document because it's scanned as one continuous stream of bits.
How can, and again, the guys who have focused on the certificate, and you certainly have, that they can't find another birth certificate that says, that has African as a race. One of the things that those of you who ever looked at the Obama birth certificate, it says father's race, and then it says African, which led everyone to believe that some enormously politically correct individual, the forger, that I dubbed Jimmy down the hall, and I may change my mind after reading it, but Jimmy couldn't say colored or couldn't say black or couldn't say Negro, but Negro and colored were the choices of words that the state of Hawaii used in 1961.
1961.
They're not politically correct terms today, but then, so they can't, can anyone find another birth certificate where the mother or father were black, or it says African as a race, Don?
No, and if it exists, I have yet to see it. And you're right. The person who's creating the forgery has to think in terms of 1961.
And they didn't.
The forger clearly did not. Then toss in the other aberrations on the form, like different texts. If you type something on a document, the letter A is going to be the same letter A throughout the document.
Indeed.
Yes, it can be slightly different because of the pressure on the key as you're typing, but it generally will have the same size, shape, and outline. Well, on the Obama document, you have different versions of letters, which is a clear indication that they cut and pasted documents or items from other documents. It's obvious. Anybody who knows anything about documents would look at it and know it's a forgery.
I have read, and I don't have any of this expertise, that an electric typewriter was, to a high degree of probability, was used, not a computer, but although a computer is eventually used, it's an electric typewriter which did not exist in 1961 when these guys did that. Agreed?
Right.
I mean, that ball, that little thing. The ball used to spin.
IBM Selectric,
right.
1961. Yeah, that could have been. I've
read that, and I don't know, but there are people who claim that the typing could have not existed.
Yeah, I don't know when this electric was first introduced. I know in the 70s I remember using them at my job, but I don't remember how far back they go.
So, I mean, if you would just recap that for a moment, the birth certificate, what's wrong with it?
Well, one is the fact that you can click on various parts of it and move things around, like the registrar's signature, which obviously you can't do on a regular scanned document. You've got information itself that's inconsistent, like race, African. You wouldn't put that on a document in 1961. Then you have the different texts, the different letters, the different characters that look like they came from different typewriters. Well, that you wouldn't get either. Now, if somebody wants to suggest that they typed a word and then took the paper out and put it in a different typewriter to type another word, could that explain it? Yes, but it doesn't make any sense at all. You wouldn't do that. So there are many, many things wrong with the document that Sheriff Joe Arpaio's cold case posse, investigator Mike Zuhl, that team has done a tremendous amount of work. And one of these days, they'll hold a press conference, and they'll release their information. And anybody with a rational mind will be persuaded that the document is a forgery.
And
now, as far as who did it, I'm putting my money on Valerie Jarrett, but it could have been Loretta Fuddy.
No,
it could have been someone else.
Sure. Or the infamous politically correct Jimmy down the hall.
Or Jimmy down the hall. What
I think is interesting, and we're close to the next pause, what I think is interesting is that when that dropped, it was right when Trump had offered the money, the book was coming, there was a drumbeat that had begun about, and again, there's this list, folks, of things that have been suppressed. And I'm just going to read them, and you say whether or not we've ever seen them. Original birth certificate. No.
No.
The marriage license, Obama Dunham marriage license.
No.
Sotero Dunham marriage license.
No.
Sotero adoption records.
No.
Basuki School, one in Indonesia.
Indonesia. We've seen one page.
Right.
That showed he was registered.
As a citizen of the country, too, right?
As a citizen of Indonesia. Yeah. Which normally would happen only if you were legally adopted by his stepfather, Wowo Sotoro, which would make him an Indonesian citizen and not an American citizen.
Panahu school records.
No.
Selective service.
Well, we've seen...
Yeah, here we go, right?
The selective service registration form he allegedly filled out at the post office and sent in when he turned 18. But that also has some issues with it.
All right, let's keep going for a second. We'll come back to this.
Considered a forgery.
Occidental college records.
No way.
passport records?
Not his. We've seen his mother's passport records, but only back to 1965. The State Department has refused to release pre-65 records.
Columbia College?
No.
Columbia thesis?
No, if he even wrote one.
Harvard College records?
I believe not.
Harvard Law Review articles?
I don't know that he wrote any.
Baptism certificates?
No.
Medical records?
No, other than the generic statement from a doctor saying he's healthy.
Illinois State Senate records?
No, he's kept those close to the vest.
Illinois State Senate schedule?
No.
Law practice client list?
No.
University of Chicago articles?
No.
And as I said before, if you and I were to go to get our Obamacare, we have to provide them with more personal information than this man has provided. He's become in his second term as President of the United States.
Sure. And anything you provided for Obamacare is subject to being hacked, which is more than can be said about his accidental college school records.
Let us, when we come back this time, begin with his mother, Stanley Ann Dunham. This guy is terrific. His work is up on our website, 710knus.com. On the line with us, it just isn't getting any better than this guy. Don Fredrick, the Obama life coincidences we've been talking about, but his research is so in-depth, and we have, again, there's no we here. It's Mark Crowley has done this incredible job and has a link to all of his work, plus his really funny cartoons and pictures that are up as well, 710knus.com. Most recently, in keeping my ear to the ground, this Stanley Ann Dunham bikini picture. Don, this is another one of those mysteries like Stanley Ann Dunham nude photos.
Yeah.
Let's take the bikini picture first and why it may or may not be significant.
Well, as you mentioned in your first hour, it was allegedly taken in June. Was it June?
July or July, yeah.
July of 1961. Well, a young 18-year-old in a bikini in July of 61 in Hawaii, that's an expected photo, but not when you're going to have your baby on August 4th. And she was clearly not pregnant in the photograph. So you can argue that, as some people do, that she had already given birth, or she would give birth a lot later than August 4th, 61, and that the photo was, in fact, taken in July of 61. If you look at the few school pictures around that show Obama, he is taller and larger than some of the other kids, which could indicate he was a little bit older than he says he is. On the other hand, he's over 6 feet tall, and he's tall by nature anyway, so maybe he was a tall kid.
But what does this picture, again, with the geeks that do this, there's a picture, you guys, of Stanley Ann Dunham allegedly taken in July of 1961 on the beach at Waikiki. Now, it is Waikiki. People have confirmed that.
Yeah.
But this would be a month before, so she's not 8 months pregnant.
No, she can't. She's not 8 months pregnant. So the photo was either taken much before then, which I think is more likely, or he wasn't born in August of 61.
Precisely.
He was born months earlier, a year before, a year
later.
Like
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I have spoken with people who went to school with Obama Sr. at the University of Hawaii. One person I talked to even dated him. She went dancing with him. And she and her friends will not come forward. They will not give their names. They will not talk to anybody. But they have to talk to me. And they've insisted they never saw her. They never saw Dunham with Obama Sr. He never talked about her.
No.
They never saw them together.
No.
He never said he was going to have a baby, et cetera, et cetera.
They never lived together.
They never lived together.
The lies,
to talk about, after 2 years they got divorced. Well, there is a divorce document, which, by the way, suspiciously has one page missing from it. The missing page may very well have to do with child custody. Anyway.
Well, by the way, let me come back. We have so many smart people. It's impossible. The Selectric, the IBM Selectric typewriter, could have not been used on a real birth certificate because they weren't there until a year later. In other words,
Oh, okay.
I'm getting barraged with this morning, so I'm just want to say, everybody, thank you very much. The history, the IBM Selectric typewriter, radical innovation, completely disrupts business typewriter market, transforms speed, accuracy, flexibility. However, it doesn't show up until much later than what the Obama birth certificate would suggest. And I've always read that. But thank you, everybody, so they can quit.
Yes, thank you. Then we were wise to be cautious about that.
Indeed.
Actually, the more suspicious photo is not the bikini on the beach photo. The more suspicious photo is one allegedly taken at the airport in Hawaii that shows Barack Obama standing in between Obama Sr. and Stanley Ann Dunham, his mother. And in the photograph, you can see that there's been some manipulation done of the image, as if somebody was cut and pasted in the photo, because her arm is light, and then the hand is much darker. Now, you could argue it's a shadow, but it isn't a shadow. If you look at the photo, you can tell there's something suspicious about it, and that one bothers me more. There are a number of photos. Let me change it. Veer slightly off topic here. Instead of details, I want to talk generically. I've spent 7 years on this stuff. I've typed over 10,000 pages, or close to 10,000 pages. I've spent thousands and thousands of hours on this. And the best way I can describe this process is, consider a jigsaw puzzle. You have on the table, your kitchen table before you, you have 1,000 tiny pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. And you're trying to put the puzzle together. And that's what I'm trying to do. The problem, though, is you don't have the box that the puzzle came with. So you don't have the picture of what the puzzle is supposed to look like when you're done. Now, introduce some extra pieces on the table that don't belong to the puzzle, but they were placed there by Obama operatives to confuse the issue. And take a few pieces off the table and hide them, like it's not school records, so you can't see them at all. That's what you're faced with when you're trying to create this past, the timeline of Obama. I have things in the timeline that I'm not suspicious of, but it's hard to know what's true because of the intentional deception. Now, it's one thing to say, okay, I can understand it's difficult to write a biography of George Washington because you're relying on other people's works, and you can't interview anybody who was alive. But
we know, I'm right close to a break, but we know more about Rutherford B. Hayes than we know about Barack Obama.
Probably.
We know more about George Washington than we know about Barack Obama.
Yeah.
I'm really close to the big pause at the top, and we'll come back on the other side. Our guest is fabulous. The Obama Timeline, 1961-2008. It's up on our website, 710knus.com. And Don will continue with us and come back with us many, many, many times. Do 2 sentences or 3 sentences that would best describe your quest and who you think Barack Obama is.
Wow. Well, I think he was a pampered child, he wasn't an only child, he had a stepsister. A pampered child, raised primarily by people who were not his parents. He was raised more by his grandmother and grandfather than by his mother. He was a person who was literally shunned and abandoned by his mother at least twice, by his birth father, and by his stepfather, Lolo Sotoro. Yeah. That in itself could lead someone to have psychological problems.
Speaks volumes.
And I think for his entire life, he's had to deal with those problems, the psychological problems of being abandoned several times.
Does he know the truth of his life?
I'm not really sure, but I know he was raised in an environment where he was surrounded by communists, socialists, radicals. His high school mentor was Frank Marshall Davis, who I agree with Joel Gilbert was probably his biological father.
I agree.
He was taught hatred by Frank Marshall Davis. He knew what Bill Ayers, everybody he knew. If you go through the history,
Oh, sure.
everyone in his life was a radical or socialist or communist. Everybody.
We come back.
And that's what we're left with.
We come back. I have been reading every evening the work of this man. It's up on our website, 710knus.com, along with all these incredibly well put together photos that are just, some of them are laugh out loud funny. If you're just joining us, this is the second hour, and by no means will this be the last appearance of this man. He is tremendous. He's done his bio. He's talked about it. He is in a ever-growing cadre, if you would, of people who simply will not turn away from the truth. And the question is asked, who is the President of the United States? The aspects of the life of Barack Obama from birth to present. And every attempt that's ever been made to do this right has been turned back. And I just need to do this one more time to set the standard, and then we'll go back to his mom, Stanley Ann. But let me just get on a list of things. I mean, the refusal to provide anyone with any records of his life. Historians call them bona fides. So let us begin, if we can, real quickly, get down this list again. The original birth certificate, has it ever been released?
No.
Original Dunham Obama marriage license?
No.
Sotero Dunham marriage license?
No.
And, of course, there was this weird divorce paper with a page missing in the alleged Obama-Dunham marriage, which never happened. The Sotero adoption records?
No. If there was an adoption, we don't know.
But when he is enrolled in that one school, it's although it's an Indonesian school, it's not a madras.
Right. The school is intended only for Indonesian citizens. So the assumption is he became a citizen through illegal adoption.
And there's a school, I think it's pronounced Besuki, B-E-S-U-K-I.
Yeah.
And was the applications to that school, have they ever been released?
So, no, we haven't seen those.
Punahu School, an expensive private school, ever released?
No.
Selective Service, and I believe this, that he ran that scam for so long that he was a foreign national, that he never believed he had to register for the draft. He thought he'd get away with it. And when he gets into public life, they realize he needs a draft card.
Right.
And they
because you have to bet he enrolled in college as a foreign student.
Oh, sure, of course.
With an Indonesian passport.
Of course.
To get freebies.
Yes, to get it all. So so Occidental college records?
Don't have those.
Pakistani passports when he traveled to Pakistan?
No.
Columbia College?
No.
Thesis at Columbia?
No.
Harvard admissions, Harvard College records?
No.
Law review?
No.
Baptism certificates?
No.
Medical records?
Nope.
Any Illinois state records at all? Schedules when he was in the Senate?
No, he kept those under lock and key, too.
Law practice clients?
No.
Any work from University of Chicago?
No.
Okay. So his mom, these nude photos, do you, as Joel Gilbert, do you believe, and I believe, that that is his mother posing nude?
Yeah, I think so. And one of beside the fact that the person in the photos strongly resembles his mother, albeit with more makeup, some of the photos, you can see the home furnishings where the photo was taken. And there's a sofa in one of the photos that matches a sofa from other photos that are known to have been Frank Marshall Davis's house.
Indeed.
So if the photos were taken in his home, and if the person in the photos strongly resembles Stanley Ann Dunham, why would you not believe it was his mother in the photos? Now, that's another indication that the father of Barack Obama was Frank Marshall Davis. And frankly, as Obama gets older, he looks more like Frank Marshall Davis.
Oh, stunningly like he does.
Yeah, now there are people say, and I bought it for a while, there are people say, boy, he looked a lot like Malcolm X, and his older daughter for a while looked a lot like Malcolm X's daughter. No. There was some resemblance, but the Frank Marshall Davis, it makes more sense. And clearly he looks nothing like the Kenyan.
No, and neither, indeed. So the story...
And James, just briefly, why does he not care about his poor brother, half-brother George, living in a Nairobi slum on $1 a day?
It's not his brother.
He doesn't care because he's not his brother.
It's not his brother. So the amount of research that you've done, and I want you to say it one more time. How long have you been working on this story?
I started in mid to late 2007, and it ended up becoming a full-time job, and it's 10, 12 hours a day now, every day, weekends included. I haven't taken a vacation since I started. I feel guilty if I miss a day because then I have people writing me saying, what happened? Why is there no update? God forbid my computer crashes.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's been full-time, and it's, but I think it's been worth it because some people are learning. More people are learning than ever before. And there are so many things that the media just never told us. In 1996, when he first ran for the Illinois State Senate, when he was introduced to the public and his fundraisers in the living room of Bill Ayers, he was a member of the Socialist New Party. It was called the New Party.
Absolutely.
And that's not something that we're making up. It's not a conspiracy theory.
No.
There are documents to prove it.
Yeah.
There are press announcements, newspaper announcements by the new party saying, congratulations to Barack Obama, our new party member who was elected to the Illinois State Senate.
Yeah.
Why did NBC, CBS, ABC, why did they not care?
Well, it's a Trotskyist organization. The Trotskyites were, driven out by the Stalinists out of the mainstream, and they formed the SWP. Anyone who's ever read their communist, these guys, they were Trotskyites, is who they were. And he was.
Yeah, the connections. Well, as you've read on the air, can it all be a coincidence?
No.
The coincidences are stunning. Who knows? This person knows this person, who knows this person, who knows this person. I tell you, every time Obama appoints somebody to a position in the government, almost every time I recognize the name. And I go back in my files and I say, oh, this is where so-and-so came from. He was blah, blah, blah. He was connected to so-and-so. The average person doesn't see it, but I catch it all the time because I've been doing this nonstop.
Let me bring you back here. So one of the things that Jack Casho has done and Dr. Corsi has done and others have done is this autobiography, how do I say this? Barack Obama presents a picture of himself to his publisher where he claims Kenyan birth. He wrote this. There's no question about it. He wrote it. This woman's trying to fall on her sword and say that she wrote it. But of all the countries in the world, she just randomly selected Kenya, correct? No,
right. In his basically author biography, the little blurb that the agents and publishers have to send out, and that's always written by the author. So
he writes this bio that he himself is a Kenyan, and he gets an apostle, as you say and others have said. He just happens to receive an impossible to believe $125,000 advance to write a book about race relations, which he just happens to fail to write. And he takes the money, goes to Bali with Michelle, and he gets a second advance for $40,000.
Right, and to the average viewer listening, that's a horrendous amount of money. We're not talking 2014. Even today, you wouldn't get a $125,000 publisher advance for a book unless you're somebody famous, because they get burned. Look at the publisher got burned on Hillary Clinton's latest book. It's unbelievable that he would have been given $125,000. And remember, when that happened, he was nobody. He had not given his keynote address at the John Kerry convention. Nobody knew who the heck he was.
So what am I to conclude from that? I mean, clearly, the publishing house, and we've seen that bio with his picture where he claims Kenyan birth. He himself personally claims he was born in Kenya.
Yes. But now, of course, he pretends he never said that or wrote that.
Well, and I don't believe he was born in Kenya. I mean, I want people to, but this is here's my belief, and fill in the blanks. He had a great con going that he was a Kenyan prince. He actually told people he was a Kenyan prince, but that he was a Kenyan. And he used that, and sometimes he would tell people he was Indonesian, and some people he would tell he was Kenyan, but he always used that storyline to gain access, to get scholarships, to get benefits. And he was schooled by, I think, his Toot and Gramps, by Frank Marshall Davis, by God only knows who's, by El Mansour, by whomever it was at the time that he was being directed by.
Right.
Do you accept that?
Sure, I certainly do. He was taught, he learned how to lie. His mother was an infamous liar. One of her acquaintances said she would make you believe anything while you were face to face, but a few minutes after she'd leave, you'd realize what she said wasn't realistic or true. That's what somebody said about her. She would tell stories, and everybody would know it was just nonsense. And I think he grew up seeing that and knowing that, oh, well, you can tell these white lies, or even greater than white lies, because that's how you get ahead. That's how everybody gets ahead. That's how it is in the world. And he kept doing it.
In your chronicle in 2003, you talk about Obama and his wife attending a dinner, and I made notes from all of your work, so again, you're going to have to do this show with me 25 more times, but Michelle and Barack Obama attended dinner in 2003 in the honor of Rashid Khalidi. Who is Rashid Khalidi?
He was, he had been the public relations guy, the spokesman for the Palestine Liberation Organization, although everybody denies that, but that's what he did. So he was Yasser Arafat's PR guy. And he was leaving Chicago to teach, I think to teach at Columbia in New York. And they had a going-away dinner. I don't remember the location, but Obama was there with his wife, and I think he was at the dinner seated next to Bill Ayers and Bernardine Dorn. At any event, Ayers and Dorn had also signed the guest book, so they were there at the dinner. Now, at the dinner, which supposedly was videotaped, and the videotape is in the possession of the Los Angeles Times.
This is the swords and the beheading, right?
The swords and beheadings. The videotape has not been released by the Los Angeles Times. Now, why would they not release it?
Oh.
Anyway, he was a close friend of Khalidi and his wife, Mona. They were also babysitters for the Obamas, as were Bill Ayers and Bernardine
But
Dorn.
what's important here, because we're talking about, most recently, how Barack Obama treated the state of Israel when the go-round's going on between Hamas and Israel. And you make a case, which I think is legit. Every time, 100% of the time, he backs the Sunni sect. And he also, his demonstration of his dislike of Israel and not helping the Israelis. But in what your research, and I'm a geek because I'm on you, and you may have, I just have to, but there was simulated beheadings with fake swords, and these people were stomping on American, Israeli, and British flags.
Right. So at the dinner, there was a children, not a dance. This was a children's dance group. Little kids called the Sanibel Al-Quds. Al-Quds is their name for Jerusalem. Dabka troupe from Milwaukee. They were in Chicago to perform this Debka, a Middle Eastern dance, and they use simulated beheadings with fake swords. They stomp on American flags, Israeli flags, and British flags during the dance. And during this dinner, Obama spoke in praise of Khalidi, and allegedly he said, Israel has no God-given right to occupy Palestine, and they've committed genocide against the Palestinians. Now, whether it's Obama's remarks or this children's dance group or maybe other things that are on that tape, the LA Times won't release it. And they've had it, and that could have sabotaged his election.
But does it explain, here's my question again, Don, does it explain, as you point out, when you start to look at his Sunni life, whether it's his, if you accept that his biological father is Barack Sr., or they call him the Kenyan, then he's a Sunni Muslim. He gets adopted by Lolo Soetoro, who also is a Sunni. He attends a school that's Sunni. And even, we haven't come to Reverend Wright yet, who himself was a Muslim at one time, but comes in and says, well, I helped Barack Obama blend his Muslim thought into Christianity.
Now, keep in mind that Reverend Wright's church, Trinity United Church of Christ in Chicago, it has more than a few Muslim members.
Oh.
And it's kind of this like an unstated thing. You go and it's a community thing, and you make your friends, and it's kind of loosey-goosey.
Yeah, he hooked people up. I mean, that's where he meets Michelle either there or the law firm. It's not clear.
Yeah. Now, Oprah Winfrey used to go to
That's
that
right.
church,
She
and then
quit.
it was so radical, it became
quit.
so radical as she left.
She quit.
But Obama, during the campaign in 2008, said, "Oh, I've never missed a sermon."
Yep.
Until somebody came out with some of the outrageous things Wright said, and he said, "Well, I wasn't in church for that one."
When he said "goddamn America," and
Yeah.
I wasn't there that day.
Yeah, I was playing golf that day. I missed that one.
No, but coming back to this at this dinner, and he shows up with all these guys, and of course, I think again, it's an explanation of his personal beliefs, his faith, whatever it is, and his treatment of the state of Israel. I mean, and also it explains his, as you point on, this is the brilliant part of you, that he has made these decisions 100% Sunni.
Yeah, with one exception, and that is, as I said, if it's Sunni versus Shiite, he favors the Sunnis.
Mm-hmm.
If it's Sunni versus secular, non-religious, he favors the Sunnis.
Indeed.
However, the exception is so far with Iran. Now, Iran is the Ayatollah, that's Shia.
Mm-hmm.
But Obama will make an exception, as in give money back to Iran, loosen up the sanctions.
The money went back, that's right.
And let them have nukes because they're anti-Israel.
In
other words, anti-Israel trumps everything for Obama.
You guys, I'm going to place you on hold. Please, again, I have been nightly wading through Don's work, and up on our website, 710knus.com, not only these fabulous pictures, but his work, and go to work yourself. And there's nothing he hasn't said that he can't document in footnotes. It just is, it's a very academic approach to this. It's 710knus.com. The Obama life, his birth through 61, and then his first 100 days in office, and the beat goes on. This is a remarkable person, and not his last time on the show. His name is Don Fredrick, lives in Chicago. And he's the guy that we were using the coincidences, the so-called coinkydinks, that, as others have said, if you take them they if taken in a singular appearance, it doesn't mean much. When taken as a whole, a computer would blow its main circuits if you ask it to calculate the odds that all these things happen by chance alone. The so-called coinkydinks of Barack Obama's life. And we were talking about that sword dance, and he appears, and this is Barack and Michelle, 2003, the dinner in honor of Rashid Khalidi, who just happened to be the former PLO operative, and there was a dinner and this dance that took place, and they simulated beheadings, and of course, and it's almost like the other part of this, he denies being a Muslim. Now, what does your research tell us about Barack Obama being a Muslim?
Well, we know he studied Islam and the Quran as a student in Indonesia. We know that his mother kept the Quran around the house when he was young, as well as the Bible and various other religious type things. We know that she was not the Dorothy Gale from Kansas Methodist he portrayed her to be. She attended the East Shore Unitarian Church in Bellevue, Washington. It was known as the Little Red Church on the Hill.
Little Red Church on the Hill. I love.
Now, there's a reason for that, and there's a reason these people are called red diaper babies. My inclination is to believe that as time went by, his mother and he just became atheists, agnostics. I don't think he holds religion too dearly. It's more of a cultural sympathy kind of thing, and the ingrained anti-Israel mentality that was drummed into him by Frank Marshall Davis and a number of other people. So while his sympathies may lie with the Sunni Muslims, I don't think he surreptitiously faces Mecca 5 times a day to pray. Although he did tell a New York Times interviewer once, he recited the daily call to prayer or something like that. And the Times reporters said, "Oh, and it was great. He did it with a wonderful accent." The Times has since removed that recording from its website for guess what reason. So I'm inclined to think that he's not particularly religious at all. We know he rarely goes to church, once or twice a year. He says it's because he doesn't want to disrupt people. Well, he sure doesn't mind disrupting traffic when he goes to fundraisers.
That's right. That's right.
So I think that's less of an issue. Going to church on a Sunday is far less disruptive than ruining Los Angeles traffic at 5 p.m.
One of the more interesting and devastating parts that you can bore into his life, and I recall when we got into the Social Security number, and he has a Connecticut number. He uses a multiple. So he's, by the way, he has used in your research. Let me ask it as a question: has he or has he not used, meaning the President of the United States, multiple Social Security numbers in his life?
Yeah, that's been confirmed by private investigators who found evidence of more than one Social Security number used by him over the years. One, the one he's using now starts with 042.
042.
Which a lot of 042, which a lot of people know is a Connecticut number. Mm-hmm. He never worked, nor has he lived in Connecticut.
No.
He should not have a Connecticut number. You can say it was a typo, but it's not a typo. He stole somebody's number. He also used a number from Ohio,
mm-hmm.
and that number.
That was 28. Was that 282?
I think 282.
Yeah.
And those and the private detectives found that information, and with that number, he listed his address as the Hart Senate Office Building.
Yeah, 713 Hart Senate Office Building.
Now, if you stop anybody on the street and ask them, what does it mean when somebody has used multiple Social Security numbers? Everybody you ask will have the same answer. They'll say it's fraud or an illegal immigrant. Everybody. There's nobody who will say, oh, that's just a mistake, it's a typo, nobody could really have two numbers. Something was going on there.
Let me bounce my theory off of you. And this is, for what it's worth, we're going to talk about that tomorrow. There is a set-aside part of Social Security, this is just because I've read it, for foreign nationals, that they have a separate Social Security designation. And like mine and yours and everybody else, it depends on where you register, not where you were born, but where you register.
Yeah, right.
And so, like mine is Western Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh, and it's 185. That's on my first three, which designates where, it's their geographical number. By the way, as you know, he's honchoed a law to change all of that now. And that's scary in itself.
Oh, right. Because people will say, oh, Don, you're wrong, because the number doesn't mean anything.
Not anymore.
Well, not anymore, because
right.
Since he's been in office, they changed it. It's no longer geographically assigned.
But we know that, or at least he claims his first paying job was, scooping ice cream at Baskin Robbins.
In Honolulu.
I believe this. I believe that he had the grandma, that Toot, got him an SSN for a foreign national, because they're running the foreign national scam. And he used that. But when he gets to Chicago and he gets into politics and he realizes that anybody looking at this is going to see a weird number. Now, maybe it goes back.
Right.
Maybe it goes back to Toot again, because at this time, she's a clerk of the court. And that old guy who really did have the 042 died in Hawaii, and he was actually came to this country and he's an old guy, went to Hawaii and he died, and maybe Gramps or Toot, probably Toot, stole the number, but then they realized that he can't present that foreign national SSN because that's been part of his phony identity, and so then they invent the 042. What do you think?
I think that makes perfect sense. And remember, Grandma Dunham not only worked in the bank, she worked in the estate and
absolutely.
trust area. Well, that's precisely where you can get Social Security numbers of dead people.
Exactly. And, of course, it also rolls back into Bernadine Dorn, who was also manufacturing phony IDs for the weathermen.
Sure, and Dorn knew perfectly well how to find SSNs of dead people.
Absolutely.
And that's not uncommon at all.
No. But again, that's why the President of the United States, as we speak, could not pass E-Verify, the system used by employers to confirm whether an immigrant job apps have valid numbers. Also, and we said at the beginning of the show, I've always kept this with me, to sign up for Obamacare, you and I will have to provide the government with more personal information than Barack Obama has ever provided to become President of the United States.
Exactly.
But I also believe that that number, he did have a legit SSN in the sense of the story that was being told, the so-called false narrative. And when it was time, when it was showtime, they came up with a phony number. Now, you would think, let me just ask a question, and I am by no means a George Bush fan, But if George Bush had a phony SSN, how long before Brian Williams would be doing it on the evening news?
Oh, precisely. It would be 30 seconds. It would be milliseconds. And if the Los Angeles Times had a videotape of George Bush saying something he shouldn't have said at a dinner for a PLO operative,
oh my God,
that would have been on the front page for 3 weeks. It's double standards. It's understandable, not fair, but that's life. So we have to deal with it. But it does mean when all the donkey fazoo finally does hit the fan, a lot of people will be very embarrassed and ashamed, and it's going to include a lot of members of the media.
Let me come back. We're going to take a pause. We'll come back, and he attends Occidental College. Who does he say he is? In Columbia, who does he say he is? And as you have pointed out in your research, he lived with they're Muslim roommates. And then one more question for you to think about when we come back. He has no roots to Chicago. He's never lived in Chicago. He is New York. He's California. He's Hawaii. Why does he go to Chicago? I mean, we know Frank Marshall Davis is from Chicago. We know, all of these other guys, Mansour, all these guys are Chicago guys. Ayers is Chicago, all these guys. Why, of all the cities in the world, does he pick to go to Chicago? And I want you to talk about what we know about Occidental, what we know about his Pakistani travels. This guy's brilliant. The website, 710knus.com. I have been reading him almost nonstop at night. His name is fabulous. He's a researcher into the life of Barack Obama. Don Fredrick, his work is up, 710knus.com. His name is Don Fredrick. He is the man who authored Obama's Life Coincidences, and he is a tremendous researcher. I'm knocked out by his work. You can read him. Again, Mark Crowley has done a wonderful job with his work, 710knus.com, and you can follow along. And again, this is just round one. The childhood of Barack Obama, and then Occidental College and the rest of it, it's bizarre and again, these are all locked away records, so we really don't know the truth, do we? But we can speculate. So how does he get into Occidental College? Who does he say he is?
Well, my guess is, it's a private college, an expensive private college. He admits in his book, Dreams from My Father, that his high school grades weren't very good.
Or smoking pot.
And he probably was still doing that at Occidental. Whether he cleaned up his act a little later, I don't know.
That picture of him in the straw hat, he's in college smoking pot.
Yeah. My guess is that Occidental, he got in, one, because he had the money. His grandparents or somebody gave him the money, because he didn't work through college. There's no evidence of that other than his...
He drove a Mustang, right?
Yeah. Well, and then in Chicago, he was driving a souped-up Chrysler 300, which was certainly a gas guzzler, even though he believes in global warming. Yeah. But Occidental, my guess is he enrolled as a foreign student, which enabled him to get in, even despite some less than stellar high school grades, because of affirmative action. And Harvard was the same way. Columbia was the same way. Princeton for his wife the same way.
But it's who he says he is. I mean, when he rooms with these guys, he rooms separately, and he rooms with foreign nationals, and they happen to be Muslims. So who does he say he is to get in that in a deal like that?
Yeah, and when I was in college, you had a roommate. You didn't pick a roommate; you were assigned a roommate. I don't know what the Occidental College rules were, but perhaps he was had roommates that were foreigners because he himself was a foreigner, and he kept them all together. Can I prove it? No.
No, I've had people tell me that in a situation like that, they try and put the like people together, particularly foreign nationals. Right. And so had he proclaimed himself at that point, was he still Indonesian? Had he become, or Kenyan Muslim? And so he ends up with these with these Pakistani guys, and then we find out about a trip. What passport?
Right.
What passport does he use? What does he say? Who does he say he is when he goes to Pakistan?
And that we learned almost by accident.
Indeed, from
during the primaries,
right.
He was Hillary Clinton was suggesting that he had no foreign policy experience, et cetera, which was true. And and he brought up the fact that he was grew up partly in Indonesia, and then he mentioned his trip to Pakistan. And no one had ever heard of that before then.
Right.
Nobody in the press knew about it. So the press was then scurrying to find out, when did he go to Pakistan?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was 81, I think it was. Also to Jakarta. He went to Indonesia. It was a multi-nation trip.
But remember this.
Now, this is a poor college student.
Yeah. How does he do it?
So he went to Indonesia. Now, this would have been, 1961. 1981, something like that. He was 20-ish years old. Went back to Jakarta. I'm guessing he went there to renew his passport.
No question. Remember when he said, he gave a speech in San Francisco. This is why both of us really have to get a life. But he said that he traveled to, the reason he made his trip, when he starts talking about it, he said he went to Jakarta to see his mother. Well, the smart timeliner said no. His mother was no longer in Jakarta. She was back, as they say, on the rock in Hawaii. So that was a lie. Now, was it a lie that he went to Jakarta? Probably not. Did he go to Jakarta to get a renewed passport? So, although going to Pakistan wasn't illegal, but it was the height of a lot of jihadi activity, and I think Zia was running the country, and the big talk was Americans were discouraged from going there because of the climate. Did he, Don, did he go to Jakarta, renew an Indonesian passport, which certainly Jerry Corsi believes he traveled on an Indonesian passport, maybe even under a third or fourth name?
Well, that's a good question. I'm thinking it was summer of 1980 when he went to Pakistan. His freshman year roommate at Occidental was a Pakistani named Imad Hussein. And when I'm trying to recall, during his trip, he was in Hyderabad, Pakistan. Actually, it's kind of confusing because there's a city of the same name in India. He went there with his friends Mohammed Shandu and his roommate Wahid Hamid, and then he went to Kenya on that same trip. You're right, General Zia was then in charge of the country, and definitely Americans were discouraged from going there. If not, they weren't probably prohibited, but they'd have to have a good reason. And he was a 19, 20-year-old kid. So he probably went to Indonesia to renew his passport.
And if he presents from a fellow Muslim country, Indonesia's a Muslim country, Pakistan is, and he presents that Muslim Indonesian passport, he's good to go.
Yeah. And while he was in Karachi, he stayed with parents of his friends, one of whom was Sumro, I think was the name, Soomro, who was a politician, and he became interim president when Pervez Musharraf resigned.
That's right.
So somebody knew somebody.
Somebody knew, once again, a coincidence.
And the story is that Sumro was told by someone, I don't know who, was told by someone to watch over Obama while he was there. And probably the someone was someone with CIA ties. That would be my guess.
Let me do this. We have come to the end of the second hour. We will have you back in 10 show days, and we'll pick up the middle passage of all of this. But, hey, Don, my hat is off to you. And, again, the more people that become aware, as you have made so many people aware, and the more people that know, maybe the drumbeat gets a little bit louder. And finally, I don't expect Brian Williams of the Denver Post or the New York Times or the L.A. Times. I don't expect any of that. But maybe there'll be a groundswell, and somebody will say, you know what, that's a con. Let me put you on hold. Speak with Casey so we can book you again. How about 10 show days from now? We'll do it again.
Sure, that would be fine. That's been my pleasure, and thank you.
Thank you, Don. Hang on. Don Fredrick. Our website is 710knus.com.
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.